For this recipe, you'll need some kind of grain. I'm using buckwheat, but you could use rice, barley, bulgur, quinoa, anything you want. I'm using a pumpkin, but you could replace that with any kind of squash you have on hand. I'm using some low sodium vegetable broth. And I am adding in some kale for health benefits. But if you don't have kale or you really don't want to use it, you don't have to. And I'm using an onion, 7 cloves of garlic because I love garlic. If you don't love it as much as I do, you could just use around 3 or 4 cloves. I'm using some sweet white miso, but you could use any kind of miso you have on hand. And for the spices, I'm using some ground cumin and some turmeric, and you could also use salt and pepper to taste. And I'm using some salsa, which may sound weird, so I like it in here, but you could use some fresh tomatoes. That's always great. You could use 1 to 2 large tomatoes or like 3 to 4 smaller medium-sized tomatoes and just chop it up very finely, or you could even put it in a blender or a food processor, or you could use some tomato sauce. That would work nicely in here as well. I'm using 2 cups of buckwheat for this recipe, and I'm just rinsing it off first. After you rinse off the buckwheat, you are going to put it in a saucepan, and then you are going to add your liquids. And I'm using vegetable broth because I think it gives it more flavor, but you could always use regular water. So you're going to use 2 cups of liquid for every 1 cup of grain. So since I put 2 cups of buckwheat, I am going to put 4 cups of vegetable broth. And you're just going to cover it up, and you're going to cook it on a low medium heat for about 10 to 15 minutes, and the buckwheat should absorb all of the vegetable broth, and then we'll check on it. It's been about 10 to 15 minutes and the buckwheat is all cooked. It absorbed all of the liquid, and I'm just going to stir that around, set it aside, and work on cooking the other ingredients. So you're just going to cut into the pumpkin any way you are able to, and then you're going to scoop out the seeds. You can save them and roast them up, which is what I'm going to do. And then you're just going to take out the flesh, cut it in cubes, and then we're going to cook it up. I just been sauteing up some onions, and I just added in some chopped garlic. And I'm just going to cook this down a little bit. So the onions have cooked down, and I just diced up pumpkins into small cubes, and I'm going to add 3 cups of vegetable broth. And after you put in the vegetable broth, you're just going to cover it and cook it on medium heat for about 15 minutes and checking on it until it is tender. It's been about 10 to 15 minutes and the pumpkin is getting tender and it is smelling really good. And now I'm going to add the kale. I just gave the kale a rough chop and I'm going to add that in. And just stir that around and the kale will cook down. It may look like a lot, but greens, leafy greens cook down to nothing. The kale cooked down very quickly, and now I'm just going to add the rest of the ingredients. I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup of salsa. Again, you can just cut up a tomato, 1 to 3 tomatoes. You're going to add 1/2 tablespoon of turmeric. If you like more turmeric like I do, if you don't mind it, you could add more. I may even add up to a tablespoon, but if you're just starting out with turmeric or you're not a fan, just go with 1/2 tablespoon. And I am going to add 1/2 tablespoon of the ground cumin. And last, I'm going to add in the miso paste. I'm adding about 1/2 tablespoon of that. And you're just going to want to stir that and mix that Well, it's hard to do with one hand, but I'm going to scoop it off the spoon and mix it all together very well. I just transferred the buckwheat in with the rest of the ingredients and mixed it all together, and it is ready to eat. And here it is. I just added some pumpkin seeds on the top, and you could always add some fresh herbs like parsley. That would be nice as well. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy. Bye. To make the pumpkin seeds, I just rinsed them off, and now I am just going to spread them out on a baking sheet. I lined it with aluminum foil, and I'm going to put a little olive oil and sea salt on it. If you don't want to use any olive oil, you could put roast it on some parchment paper, but I personally think a little olive oil makes it roast better and taste better, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just taking a little olive oil, and I'm just going to put like a half a teaspoon, a little bit, and a little salt. And then you're just going to mix it together a little bit and spread it out and bake it in the oven at 375 degrees, checking on it in about 10 minutes. You could keep stirred a couple times too, mixed around. And here are the seeds all roasted up. It just took about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I stirred it, watched it,